Botswana. The Secretary General made a presentation on the crucial role played by SADC in empowering PSCs to conduct their oversight role in taking to task public institutions to account for their use of public resources. He also highlighted the achievements as well as challenges that SADCOPAC has faced since its inception. The SG also highlighted the implementation of resolutions by selected countries, and they mentioned quite a number of countries that have been able to implement the resolutions that have been made by SADC. This only showed that indeed SADCOPAC has made impact in the years gone by. The second presentation was on how the Parliament and PAC of Tanzania conduct business in terms of oversight. We were informed by a member from PSC in Tanzania that PSC Tanzania conduct its business with a focus on the budget process, the audit processes, and the way PSC Tanzania scrutinizes and the audit reports. He also emphasized on the crucial role of the Secretariat, and that is the Parliament of Tanzania. He also stressed the need to do planning for the PSC meetings, and I think, as you saw yesterday, he took us through the series of processes that they take when they're doing, before they actually do their meetings. He stressed, he also talked about the importance of collaboration and good working relationship with the Auditor General, including other like-minded stakeholders. He concluded on the need to have a mechanism to follow up on resolutions. I was particularly impressed with the way PSC Tanzania emphasizes on the follow-up on the resolutions that are made by the PSC, and I think that is very, very important. The third was on social compact to combat illicit financial flows in Africa. And this was presented by the chair of Namibia, who made a statement on the extractive industry sector, on the African economies, with Namibia as a case study. And also, we had the Auditor General from Uganda, who also made a presentation on the auditing of the extractive industry contracts to ensure there is transparency and accountability. APNIFFT presented on the role that the institution plays in combating IFFs, particularly capacitating member states on measures to fight IFFs and tax evasion, because this is an issue that many countries are grappling with, including our own in the region. And there was also a presentation from the official from the Ministry of Finance under the Finance Intelligence Unit, who presented and made us aware on the role of the ministry that is playing in combating anti-money laundering and combating terrorism financing. And I think this sounds like a new thing, a new phenomenon, but it's been happening for a long time in our region. And there was also a presentation from the official from the Revenue Authority in Tanzania, who also made a presentation on revenue collection measures in the extractive industry to ensure combating IFFs. Of course, he had quite a number of issues that he presented, but this is just a summary of his presentation. Then we also had the chair for PSC in Zambia, who also happens to be the chair of SADCOPAC, made a short presentation on the experiences of combating IFFs and transfer pricing, and the need to have a robust legal framework to fight IFFs. We move on. There was also a presentation on size independence in the SADC region. So the Deputy Business Leader of Technical Audit Support in the SAI of South Africa presented on the milestones that have been achieved in South Africa to have one of the SAIs in the region that enjoyed extensive independence. As a matter of fact, I think it was also mentioned by the SG in his presentation, presenting as South Africa and Seychelles as SAIs that are truly independent by the definition, or strict definition of that word independence. So South Africa and Seychelles, they pose as quite very good examples of the SAIs that are really, really independent. This presentation focused on the history of for the attainment of independence as a SAI. The legal statutes that are important, but the most paramount part in financial independence, where the Auditor General does not depend on the executive for funding, or where funding is guaranteed without any hassles and hurdles. I was talking on this, I think it was the Vice Chair who observed that actually South Africa gives us a very good example, because they have a procedure of charging their stakeholders whenever they are conducting audits, just to cement the financial independence of the institution. The SAI in South Africa has its own regulations and governance and recruitment and reports to Parliament and not to the executive. Because as we know that there are in some jurisdictions, the SAI reports to the executive, and that has some challenges, especially on independence of the SAIs. The SAI-PAC strategic support and cooperation, and there was a presentation official from the Comptroller and Auditor General who presented on collaboration and support between PAC and CAG in Zanzibar. PAC scrutinizes reports from the CAG, and CAG provides technical support to PAC. So it's a symbiotic relationship that is there. And there was need for PACs to ensure that they clear backlogs of audit reports. And I think you will agree with me, members of PACs, as well as SAIs, that if the countries are facing challenges, is about clearing of backlogs of audit reports. So there was an example that was given yesterday in the presentation. On the panel discussion on the role of PACs in emergency procurement, I think 3 or 4 panelists, I started giving an example from Malawi during COVID time, and so I made the presentation on the role of PSC on emergency procurements, and I did indicate that emergency procurements were bleeding grounds for fraud, and therefore PACs need to request for investigative audits and take to task the culprits. As I said yesterday, that these issues will always be there. They will always come our way, and there's need for PACs to stand up and indeed stand up to the occasion and making sure that they request for audits for these emergency procurements. And there was also a presentation from Madam Madidi Malo Singo from South Africa, from the business unit. She's a leader in charge of regulatory audits at the Auditor General of South Africa. She emphasized on doing real-time audits for emergency procurement so as to curb malpractices. She emphasized that the real-time audits were good in identifying gaps and thus addressing them in real time. Similarly, such audits act as preventive measures because culprits are taken to task while funds are still disbursed. Honorable PSC Chair for Zambia and Chair for SADCOPAC also presented on the challenges that are faced in accounting for donations. Specifically, that's what he also touched in emergency situation. He noted on some donations that are not recorded properly, resulting in fraud, and some donations that are being recorded. So the day ended at that note, but I think as you have seen and indeed as you followed through yesterday, it was quite a very packed day, and I believe that we took home notes that will continue to help us in our various jurisdictions, being members of PSCs, officials from SAIS, officials from various other organizations. I believe all of us picked things that will be able to help us going forward. And we are looking forward to a day today, which is also another packed day with quite very interesting presentations, which I believe will also help us in our various jurisdictions. Thank you very much, and good day. Thank you.
Very good morning. Assalamu alaikum. It's for you that I'm doing, Deputy Chair. Thank you very much. It's a very great pleasure. I'm only here as chairperson, and without wasting time, I would call on my brother, a lawyer by profession, Honorable Brian Dupe, to explain the role of SADCOPAC and SADCPF in the model law of public finance management. Honorable Brian Dupe. It's very quiet. Someone is, please.
A very good morning to us all. All protocols observed. I would straight go into the business that I have been invited to deal with. To start with, I want us to understand that if we don't get so much from it, you may just get a take home that corruption is the antithesis of constitutionalism, democracy, and the rule of law, as it compromises national, regional, and international peace and security. This is what we believe, and this is the motivation for us fighting corruption as PACs and as parliaments in general, because we believe that it is a serious threat to peace and security. As the SG yesterday indicated, that it is a serious threat to human rights, and conversely, it then means that it becomes a threat to peace and security, because anything that threatens human rights also threatens peace and security. The main issues that motivate the discussion around the model law, as well as the principles and guidelines on corruption in SADC, are motivated by these three key findings: that there are existing legal and regulatory gaps in major states in relation to public finance management. The principles and guidelines on curbing corruption are 18 in total and are meant to promote effective governance and accountability in the SADC region. And what is more important is that the model law and the principles and guidelines are to be read conjunctively and not disjunctively, in the sense that as soon as you hold on to the model law, you must also at the same time hold on to the guidelines and principles, so that when you are reading them, you read them as one. This is our position as SADCOPAC, that they need to be read together. And they must be able to assist us to do the following things: review, enact, or amend the public finance management laws. So we must make sure that we are updating our laws relating to public finance management, and also laws relating specifically to anti-corruption, and also the standing orders and rules of Parliament relating to the establishment of the Public Accounts Committee and other oversight committees, and also laws relating to empowerment and independence of the Supreme Audit Institution. So we must make sure that after, say, 2022, how far have we gone to actually improve those laws? I will be jumping other things because SG already discussed a lot about them yesterday. And what I want us to understand is who can use or refer to the model law. The policymakers, when developing policies and strategies relating to better finance management, the legislative drafters, when drafting national laws or improving public finance management, lawmakers when making the laws, then the judicial officers when interpreting laws and in relation to public finance management, and researchers when doing research, and administrators when funding. So what does this tell us? It tells us that as public accounts committees, we need to start engaging with all these various sectors in our different countries and make sure that they appreciate and understand the law. Because using judicial activism, if our parliaments are slow and the judges already know about these laws, when interpreting things relating to corruption or public finance management, and they have been made aware of the existence of these model laws, they may actually start to implement them, and those judgments in all common law countries then become part of your law. So it is also a faster way of adopting the model law as well as the guidelines. You make sure that all the stakeholders get to understand and appreciate them. And I'm sure some of the things on the slides will be shared with you so that we don't take too much time. I'll just go to the existing legal and regulatory gaps in the public finance management across the region relates to the following issues that we have identified: the narrow ambit of reports under scrutiny by PACs, lack of enforcement powers by PACs, lack of enforcement for regulations of public sector debt, lack of performance-based budgets, disconnection between international commitments and budgets, misuse of supplementary budgets, no limits on quantum of public contracts entered into by the executive, and weak or poor relationships between anti-corruption bodies and national prosecuting authorities. So our action points relating to the two international instruments that we have as a region is: PACs, in collaboration with other stakeholders such as civil society, law societies, accounting and finance societies, must champion the review of domestic relevant laws such as the public finance management, procurement laws, and all legislation that have an impact on prudent public finance management, transparency, accountability, and public debt management. So from this point, our view is that in the next meetings, we must be able to have a report chair on the extent to which the PACs in the region have engaged with these societies, so that we are able to actually collaborate with them. For example, if you engage with your law society in your area, they may assist you to actually draft the draft amendment to your Public Finance Management Act, which may then be championed by the PAC in a motion in Parliament to make sure that certain amendments are done. This also then applies also to the laws relating to the empowerment of auditors. If we engage the accountants and auditors in our respective jurisdictions, they may also then draft that model draft legislation that we may then use to champion. And we do not underestimate the role of civil societies in giving pressure and publicizing the works that we intend to do. So the law, the model law only works as a benchmark and guiding instrument in terms of how our laws should look like, and we need to borrow from it in doing our work. What is also important is, maybe, Chair, with your permission, I would just want to find out how many have had sight of the principles and guidelines on combating corruption in Southern Africa. Anyone? Just show by raising your hand if you have ever read anything about it. The principles and guidelines on curbing corruption in Southern Africa. Anyone who has had sight of it? This shows how maybe far behind we are, and going forward we may then want to use that scorecard to then check the comprehension issues relating to those guidelines, because they are very key in terms of assisting us to understand corruption and the specific types of corruption that we intend to fight, because it will be very difficult for us to fight corruption when we don't understand what is corruption and what is not corruption. So the guidelines and the principles are clear in terms of indicating to us these levels, because there are different levels of corruption that have actually been classified. For example, we have the systematic corruption, which is where bribery occurs on industrial scale. These are large-scale corrupt activities. Then we have corruption actually flourishing because of weak and deliberately incapacitated institutions within our region. And also, grand corruption is usually associated with the high-level political and state functionaries. So there are basically three types of corruption that we need to watch as PACs. Bribery, this is the corruption or corrupt payment, receipt, or soliciting for private favor by public officials. Usually in many jurisdictions this comes out as criminal abuse of office. It is characterized by a relationship between the person paying and the one who is receiving the money. And it is very difficult to actually detect because they're agreeing at that level. And it is very tricky on how PAC and other institutions like anti-corruption bodies can then know and be able to tell whether corruption has happened, because these people would have agreed to exchange the money. Then we also have fraud, the calculative deception that results in the manipulation or distortion of material information, facts, and expertise by public officials who seek to draw private profit and gain from public resources. In this particular instance, this is done by sophisticated people, and even when you call them for interrogations or interviews by PACs, they may give you some strong answers, and if you are not well equipped, you may come out agreeing with them if you are not very careful, because they actually do it in a systematic way. Then the one on abuse of power relates to nepotism, favoritism, and other forms. And also, what we must look at in terms of the anti-corruption issues relates to state capture, which is actually a contemporary challenge that is facing Southern Africa, where individuals, institutions, companies, or groups are now actually running the governments indirectly. And a perfect example on how to fight this issue of state capture is actually in the South African jurisdiction, where they've actually tried to fight that, but it is not a small fight, as you'll be fighting the very powerful and connected people who would be running the government indirectly. So PACs must now also look at whether or not their governments are still being run by the elected officials, or they are now being converted to private entities by the mafia or gangs who are very rich and highly connected. So it is an area that we may need to look at, as it is also a very dangerous development that is happening, where companies are actually capturing, starting by sponsoring elections and giving cars and other resources and incentives to politicians, and at the end, determining how the government will run its business. So the principles, I'll just run through them one by one. Principle number one on the issues relating to anti-corruption are that the constitutional and statutory frameworks must be put in place to make sure that the institutions are empowered. And the notes are there, which I will not belabor you by going through them, but to simply say we need to review our constitutions as PACs and other supporting committees and see to what extent do our constitution empower anti-corruption movements or activities. The second one is codes of conduct. You would note that the main challenge that we have is, what do we do after the public officials are actually interrogated for corruption and other things? There are no codes of conduct in a majority of our states, such that when a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance has failed to do well and you have interrogated them, they are just transferred from that ministry to the other. And the guidelines and principles are saying there must be a code of conduct that must actually deal with these civil servants and make sure that we don't transfer the problem from one ministry to another, but we actually eliminate the problem. So I think in many of our jurisdictions, we have found that those people that we have interrogated and interviewed, you find them in the next ministry the next time you want to interrogate them, and they're transferred to the other, because there are no strong code of conduct that deal with how do we eliminate the problems instead of transferring them from one ministry to the other. Oversight tools and compliance mechanisms. There must be tools that deal with the transparency, integrity, and accountability of the public sector to prevent and combat corruption. Parliamentary committees must consider a committee or joint committees which are specifically dedicated to curbing corruption as a cross-cutting issue. Why is it necessary? Because we realize that the Public Accounts Committee is a post-audit committee, and by the time that things get to the Public Accounts Committee, they might be out of hand already. So the suggestion is that there must be actually possibly a standalone committee that might be able to just focus specifically with issues of corruption and have a real-time intervention on that. Principle number 4, the independence of external enforcement institutions, such as the Supreme Audit bodies, anti-corruption bodies, and the independence here that the guidelines are talking about relates to financial independence and actually decency and dignity in the offices of the auditors general. You may realize that a majority of them are housed in small corners in the ministries of finance, making it very difficult for the institutions to actually discharge of their mandate. And at times, they are limited in terms of resources, and the suggestion is that the auditors must be able to be given their budgets and run with them and then acquit, instead of begging from the very ministry or permanent secretary that they intend to interrogate to fund them so that they can interrogate them. It is very difficult to have that. Approval and domestication of international obligations on anti-corruption. We note that our governments are just going around signing those things, but they are not domesticating the obligations that mandate them to act well. Then principle number 6, inclusiveness and participation of non-state actors in corruption abatement. That means the collaboration between governments and the media and other non-state actors is a key issue. Establishment of independent budget offices. Parliaments must have an independent budget office that is able to actually inform and explain budgetary issues to members of parliament. We must not rely much on the Ministry of Finance. So it is the recommendation that there be an establishment of an independent budget office within the parliament is set up so that we do not rely on the Ministry of Finance on our issues. The integration of monitoring and evaluation and reporting. So we are saying we must have a results-based system as parliaments where a more effective legislative, representative and oversight function is intricately linked to the MP's abilities to properly conceptualize and institutionalize monitoring and evaluation functions. We must be able to then say to what extent are we able to evaluate how far we have achieved or not achieved in our goals. So parliaments must not just be elected for 5 years and just be there for 5 years. There must be a means and mechanism on evaluating what is it that we targeted to do and how far have we managed to achieve. If we didn't achieve, what were the key hindrances and how do we overcome those hindrances going forward so that parliament is not just there. Committee procedures and consensus building. I think this is clear. The SG explained about that yesterday when he was actually indicating the model and ideal pack that we expect as SADC. So I will not belabor you on this one because it was explained yesterday. Public participation in parliamentary business. I think this was also explained in many times, except to insist that in as much as we are voted to represent people, we must continuously engage them and allow them to participate and do maybe petitions and other activities without serious hindrances. I have seen that many petitions by the members of the public are dismissed on technicalities. Non-compliance with a particular format, and the speaker throws out a very important petition and all those things. So the guidelines and principles are saying we must reduce the technicalities around these issues so that we are able to engage and allow people to freely engage with Parliament. Enhance oversight tools. I am sure this SADC-PF will actually make a presentation, I'm sure, relating to issues relating to the scorecard and other things, where we are saying we must have the tools and a toolkit that we use in terms of checking our performance in terms of activities, funding, and everything that we envisage. Then we will blower protection. I'm sure this is something that we may need to look at, the establishment of whistleblower legislation in all our countries to enhance the work of Parliament. Then Parliament-specific code of conduct and integrity pledges. As the SG indicated yesterday, we need to do our work without fear, favor, affection, or ill will. But this can only be assured when we have specific code of conduct and integrity pledges for members of Parliament so that they actually perform their work well. Principle 14, specific measures for oversight of extractive sector. I think Honorable Dudu explained this, the challenge relating to the extractive sector, the mining industry. And we need specific measures of oversight. And we need to equip ourselves on many issues around this, where we check whether the mining and the extraction is helping our economies or is taking them aback. 15, strengthen the representation. We need to continuously train our MPs to strengthen their representation capacity. Yes, we know people are elected on the popularity test, but after that, you can't sustain your 5 years based simply on the popularity test. There are skills that, like SADCOPAC is doing, that we wish they continue to be done, where our members of Parliament are continuously equipped so that they are able to advocate for their things properly, including actually coming up with the draft model legislations. We know that in many of our jurisdictions, we rely on the executive to sponsor a bill because we do not have the capacity to be drafting and doing all those things. But the desire is that we must be strengthened in that capacity by making sure that we are given capacity to even do these things. Efficiency and procedural regularity of committees of parliament. Improve committee efficiency by establishing lean and competence-based committees in parliament. This is what is also in the principles that we wish is implemented. Then contract negotiations and approvals. We must strengthen scrutiny of contract negotiations and approvals and their implementation. I think presentations were done yesterday relating to I think one of the presenters was indicating about the incentives that are given and all those things. We must then be able to weigh the costs and the benefits of those, including the holidays on taxes. We need to check what benefit are we having. Then the principle 18, which is the last principle, is actually on review and analysis of reports of external oversight bodies. A culture of mutual trust and complementarity between parliaments and other institutions must be done, and we must avoid overlapping or competing jurisdiction. There is always a challenge where you think you are in competition with an anti-corruption body or with the National Prosecuting Authority, but our point is there must be complementarity. We must be able to know that if the matter is now with the National Prosecuting Authority, we trust that they are doing right. And many times you may realize that because of the sub judice principle, matters may be removed from parliamentary inquiry on the basis that they are already now pending at court. Then nothing is happening at court and your hands are tied because you cannot go and ask the judge what is happening. So we are saying there must be a mechanism that allows for Parliament to then engage with the National Prosecuting Authority or the Anti-Corruption Body to give an update. We had an inquiry here which is now in your hands. How far have you gone in terms of prosecuting that? Because it may be used as a means of actually stopping the investigations and actually weakening the role of Parliament, because the person will come before you and say the matter is now sub judice, it's before the courts, and at court nothing is done. Your 5 years lapses, the next Parliament comes in, they don't know what happened, and that person goes scot-free. So this is basically what you are saying, and that marks the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable. Please don't leave. You can just have a seat. Allow me, honorable members, to call also on all other members who are going to give the presentations. I'll call on Dr. Onai Movingi to also have a seat here. The next person I would like to call is Honorable Sothaile Kanyile. And then I'll call a representative from the Anti-Corruption Commission of Zanzibar, as well as another representative from the Anti-Corruption Commission of Tanzania, both of them. The following person I would like to call is Mr. Ludwiko Utwa. And then, did I call Dr. Movingi?
I sent a presentation on SADCOPAC.
Dr. Movingi from SADCOPAC. He's not here.
No, don't call him.
Oh.
Hello? Yeah, it's my
Oh, sorry.
yeah. No, I'm just doing I'm not doing the.
My apologies, Dr.
I'm gonna read it. I'm not
Ludwiko will come in the next session.
because I use this.
Yeah, I called.
Only one, Tanzania. Tanzania. SAG Tanzania.
Somebody that would give us a presentation on the oversight of PACs in the case of Tanzania. Oh. Yeah, you can. Just pull it closer. Then allow me to call on Dr. Onai Muvingi to give us a presentation. From SADCOPAC. And, yeah. It's not on.
SAG Tanzania.
Which one is false?
This one.
No, what I mean is.
Who's helping? Who's helping with the presentation? It's already there.
It's already here. SADCOPAC. Can you enlarge?
Yeah, it's, you can, once it is active.
Against camera.
Good morning. All protocol observed. My presentation focuses on the scorecard. I will look at the context on the development of this scorecard. I will look at the key features of the SADC model law on public finance management. I'll then speak briefly to the specific objectives and expected outcomes of the SADC model law on PFM. Presenters have already talked about it. I will look at the key users of the SADC model law. Honorable Dube has already highlighted who they are, so I will not spend time on them. I will then focus on the tracking of the extent of domestication of the model law. That's what the scorecard is focusing on. We will then look at the design of the scorecard, the questions that we are looking at. I'll also look at the process itself. How are we doing it? How are we scoring this scorecard? The criteria, then who is targeted, who are the respondents. We then look at the statistics that this card is providing before we then discuss on how useful this scorecard is. So the context of this scorecard, is the SADC model law on public finance. It is serving as the yardstick on the key characteristics of a strong and sound public finance management, legal and regulatory framework. So basically, we are saying if we apply the principles, if we apply the prescriptions of the model law, then in our jurisdictions, we do have a sound and strong public finance, legal and regulatory framework. Why is it important to have strong and sound public finance management systems? I think we are all aware it's good for governance, it's good for macroeconomic stability, it's good for reducing corruption. It instills discipline in our own countries. It also builds trust between citizens and government. So basically, that's how important the model law is to us. So the model law was developed to serve as a benchmark and guiding legal instrument for national parliaments to reinforce their domestic legal framework on public finance management. Member states are expected to incorporate best practices prescribed by the model law through amendments to the Constitution. All constitutions, I think we have been working on this assignment for some time. And when we look at constitutions for SADC member states, there are provisions relating to financial management. Some have specific areas dedicated. I'll give the example of Zimbabwe because it's one of the countries that we have used to pre-test the scorecard. They have a chapter 17, dedicated specifically to public finance. When we look at the key features of the model law, the way it is structured, there are 15 thematic areas. These are represented by parts. So there's part A, or there's part 1, so part 1 to part 16, 15 of these specifically focusing on public finance management areas, and the 16th talking about transitions. There are 45 sub-thematic areas. There are 136 sections and 449 subsections. So you find that the information that the scorecard is picking covers the 15 thematic areas and covers the 45 sub-thematic areas in the 136 sections. So you find that as the scorecard, as the instrument was pre-tested, the issue was, do we focus on 449 questions? Do we focus on the 136 areas? Because we need indicators. How do we judge ourselves as a jurisdiction, the extent to which we have domesticated the model law? How do we judge, given that the model law is the yardstick, how do we judge how far we are from attaining best practice? Remember, the model law, when it was developed, it was based on research, on international best practice in areas of debt management, in areas of budgeting, in areas of procurement, in areas of expenditure management. So how do we judge? Do we go for the 449 questions? Do we go for the 136 questions? Because that's where we are actually saying to ourselves, to what extent have our laws incorporated best practice prescribed in the model law, or we actually saying Do we look at every provision or we standardize? What we basically looked at is the expected, the specific objectives and the expected outcomes of the model law. As you go to the document itself, there are expectations. One is, the objective really is to ensure that national parliaments are enabled to conduct their legislative, budgetary and oversight functions for public finance management in a way that is transparent, efficient, and responsive to the needs of SADC citizens. And each country do have a specific objective. They are national development strategies in place, or there is a specific trajectory for a country. But what we realize is that the model law is intended to trigger policy and legal regulatory reforms and development of new laws, regulations, or revision of substantive PFM laws in member states. So we are at different stages in terms of law, in terms of public finance, management strength, but you also find that some of the specific objectives or outcomes stated in the model law is a situation. I think I just picked those that are relevant to the audience today. Parliaments passing performance-based budgets which are related to programs and corresponding key performance indicators. Honorable Dube has already spoken about this. Statutory bodies and public authorities filing their annual audit reports, audited financial statements to Parliament, Parliament through a dedicated public finance parliamentary committee empowered to monitor public debt and to call public officials for explanations in the case the debt ceiling is exceeded. We realize when you look at statutes governing borrowing, countries do have a ceiling. I'll give as an example for the country that we pre-tested this scorecard. The limit is 70% of gross domestic product, but there is a regional benchmark. And so if they exceeded the 70%, is PAC allowed to call the minister to give an explanation? The model law says they should. International commitments such as sustainable development goals, universal health coverage, and gender-based budgeting mainstreamed by ministries and public departments into the budget, and related key performance indicators being developed accordingly. So the model law expects that as parliaments pass budgets, they should be able to require the minister responsible for finance or the minister responsible for presenting the budget to ensure that these are mainstreamed. As to, I think, the key users, I will not belabor on that. Honorable Dube has already spoken about it. So let's talk about tracking extent of domestication by member states. One thing for sure is that the model law is not mandatory, but the model law is voluntary, and it is the responsibility of parliaments, as you see fit, the need for ensuring strong and sound public finance management to ensure domestication. The model law is about better public finance management, improved public finance management. So the extent of domestication is going to depend on each member state. It's going to depend on, therefore, members of parliament. And the laws that are likely to influence or that will impact on these developments will be your provisions in the Constitution, relating to aspects of public finance management. The Constitution is the supreme source of law in any country. And when we look at the provisions that are existing, for some constitutions, they are quite comprehensive. But for some constitutions, it's just a few provisions talking to finance. Remember, the building of laws also relies on constitutions or constitutional provisions. And we also recognize the fact that for some countries to change constitutional provisions, it could take long, but there are ways of improving these laws. We also see laws relating to taxation, with taxation, it's about illicit financial flows. We know tax evasion is one big area. The model law also focuses on illicit financial flows. We see the regulations of financial institution, the regulation of public service, and criminal justice and penal law. So these are some of the laws or the public finance laws that would influence the implementation of the model law. So what is this scorecard about? How is it designed? This is a digital instrument. It's online. It's also a self-assessment tool. It's not an expert from outside, or it's not a consultant that will get into a country and say, how far are we? It's a self-assessment tool. This tool is hosted by SADCOPAC. It's a tool that is compatible with laptops and smartphones. As I said, we pre-tested this already, and it is ready to be pilot tested in other countries, and then it is rolled out to all SADC member states. So you can have access to this tool from your phone. You can have access from a laptop. And you require internet connectivity, but you can work on it offline. And once you get internet connectivity, it updates automatically. The questions at the moment are based on the 136 sections in the model law. And the assumption is that respondents are knowledgeable on the legislation governing public finance management in their country. I will come back to this and just explain how we map the laws that govern public finance in a country. So the online digital tool provides instructions to respondents. As you get into the instrument, you actually then are given instructions. There is guidance in terms of the information that you are capturing. There's guidance in terms of how you are responding. You find that the questions are of a Likert scale. So you have no, you have yes, but minimal, yes, moderate, yes, substantial, and yes, fully compliant. I'm going to explain each of these later. And we are asking respondents where they say no, they are expected to give a comment. Where they say yes, there is also a comment. I'm going to be explaining further on this again. And where they say yes, we are also asking that they cite the relevant legislation. What we also then discover is that in some cases, it's a policy, so they will talk about that. So what is the information that is being captured by this scorecard? It captures both quantitative and qualitative data. it's a yes or it's a no. But from the qualitative, we are also expecting them then to explain, like if there is no provision regarding to cryptocurrency, why don't we have it? Is it because we still considering the law that is there? Is it because it's not yet legal in the country? We also ask people to cite the statute or the law where the provisions are found. So this is an example of what this looks at. The sample of questions I picked is from the aims and objective, and the question, how it is asked. The question helps the respondent to understand the part of the model law that questions are being raised. We are also expecting that by the time the respondents are self-assessing, they actually also have gone through the model law itself and they understand. So what is the process? How do we go through this process? First and foremost is that our benchmark or our yardstick is the model law. And the 15 areas in the model law that we are looking at. So that will be our benchmark. And what is the source of the information? The source of the information would be our public finance, management, legal, regulatory, and policy framework for a country. Making use of Zimbabwe, I could have made use of Zambia, or Botswana, or any country. The first thing would be our constitutional provisions on public finance management, because we are saying this is the supreme source of law. For Zimbabwe, you actually find that there is a specific area dedicated for public finance management, which could be in our jurisdictions as well. But you also find indirect provisions in some of the areas. For Zimbabwe, when it comes to local authorities, they are classified in two categories, urban and rural, and they have specific statutes that actually are also relevant as we are assessing. Then we will have the primary legislations or the acts. We also have secondary legislation, in some cases the regulations, and you will find, I think, as we pre-tested this tool, that there could be instructions, there could be policies that you will also find. So this is the process. It is helpful that this process is undertaken in a workshopping method where stakeholders are seated together and they are responding, or they are actually undertaking this self-assessment. So how are we scoring? It's either there are no laws, the provisions recommended by the model law do not exist. It's either then there are 4 cases where you can answer yes, and there is actually a weight for each answer. And the respondents, there are many, as you can see from who can use the model law, we got a number. And from pre-testing, there are a number that are there, and the list is not exhaustive. So what statistics, please?
2 more minutes.
All right. So what are the statistics that we get? The statistics, overall, we will get an index for a country. Where are we? And we will also get, for each part, the gap out of 100. And we can always go to each area, and it will summarize where the issues are. And I think lastly, let me just look at the usefulness of this scorecard. One is a tracking tool. It will actually help us to see the extent to which we have domesticated. It will also help us identify gaps and maybe the nature of support that SADC-PF should give member states. For each country, we can actually determine the time it will take us to get to the best practice, and it can also help us prioritize the areas that we would need to improve the soundness of public finance management laws in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, honorable members. I think many people are going out to get something, a snack and have tea break. Out at this point, we are just 3 minutes away from tea break. Request that we break for tea for 15 minutes, please. 15 minutes, and then we resume business. Can we? Please be on time. Thank you. So we will be starting 11:15.
Ndio nafuata.